In this short video, we're going to look at how we can create a web-based spreadsheet editor that allows you to view and edit spreadsheets entirely within the browser and with no external dependencies. If you're really keen to get started, you can do that right now using the showcase from Apryse. That also demonstrates lots of other things that the Apryse WebViewer can do, whether it's working with CAD diagrams or text editing or docx editing and so on. Okay, now let's see how we can actually implement this in our own code. I'm going to be using React, but you could use Angular or Vue or vanilla JavaScript, whatever you prefer. We're going to start off by typing npx create vite at latest. And this will scaffold a project for us that will demonstrate an entirely working React project. It will take a little while to actually set this up, partly depending on your internet speeds. We'll be asked a number of questions as part of the process, for example, the project name, and the framework we want to use, in this case React, and the variant, and we'll use TypeScript, because I like that. If you've looked at any of the other videos about how to get started with the Apryse Web SDK, you'll see that this is very familiar to the way we've done it in other projects. And that's because, in fact, there's only one line difference between what we're going to do to use WebViewer for working with spreadsheets from when we use it to work with PDFs or with docx files. Over the next couple of minutes, we're going to go through all the steps to get WebViewer working in the browser. But if you're familiar with that, then you could skip ahead and just see how we make the differences to use it for a spreadsheet editor. Great, that's now been scaffolded, so let's navigate to the folder, run npm install, and then we can actually start the project using npm run dev. After a moment or two, the default React app will appear. We don't need this, but it's great to know that our system is correctly configured. Now let's close that sample and actually start editing the files we've got. And I'm going to do that using VS Code. You can see that there's a lot of files that have been scaffolded, but we don't need all of them. So let's get rid of all of the contents from app.css and also from index.css. We won't delete those files completely because you may want to add your own CSS later to set your own styling the way you want. We'll save those two CSS files and then we'll look at the app.tsx file. And we're going to start by modifying the code that Vite created for us. Once again, there's a lot that we could remove. So let's remove the React and Vite logos. And we can get rid of that state variable and actually almost all of the code. All that we need within the HTML return block is a div element, which is where we're going to mount WebViewer. So let's add a class name into that div element. And then we'll also add a ref, which we're going to use to indicate that this is where we want to mount WebViewer when we construct it. In a moment, we're going to install WebViewer, but before we do that, let's install vite-plugin-static-copy. Once this is done, when we install WebViewer, it will copy the static assets that we need so that they're available at runtime. There's other ways you can do this using a script or copying the files manually, but we like using this plugin. We also need to update the vite config file to say where we want the plugin to copy files from and to. We won't see much during development builds, although it will work, but during release builds, the plugin will copy the files that we need into the destination static assets folder. Within the config file, we need to specify where we want the files to be copied. In this case, I'm saying lib WebViewer. The important thing is that we must match this folder with the location we specify in the WebViewer constructor when we create that in just a moment. Okay, now let's use npm I at pdftron WebViewer to install the Apryse WebViewer. Now let's head back to the app.tsx file and import WebViewer. We also need to specify what our useRef is. And in this case, we're saying const viewer, and it's a useRef, and it's of type HTML div element. Next, we'll create a useEffect hook with an empty dependency array. Within the useEffect, we'll create a WebViewer constructor. This takes a number of options, and it returns a promise that when that resolves, it gives us access to the WebViewer instance. We can use that instance object to interact with the API, but we won't do that just now. The options that WebViewer takes includes a path, which is the path that we specified in the vite-config file for that plugin, in this case lib-WebViewer. We also need to specify a license key, and you can get a free license key to try things out from the Apryse website. I'm going to enable a file picker so we can choose a file at runtime. And then we come to the one line that lets this be a spreadsheet editor rather than a PDF viewer or a docx editor. Initial mode. In this case, we're specifying it as WebViewer.modes.spreadsheet editor. And because we're using the spreadsheet editor, we need to specify that WebViewer should be created as an iframe. We also need to specify where we want WebViewer to be mounted. And that's going to be in our viewer useRef hook. Great. Now you would expect a useEffect with an empty dependency array to be fired only once when the component mounts. However, in recent versions of React, it will actually fire a second time during debug builds to enable you to find memory leaks. This would cause WebViewer to be instantiated twice, which leads to an error. To work around this, we'll use another useRef hook called isInstantiated, and we'll only actually call the WebViewer constructor the first time that we go through the loop. We don't need this code in development builds, so you can remove it then if you wish. Let's now use npm run dev to start our project again. Now we've got WebViewer showing, but there's no grid available. This is a problem with styling and CSS. We can fix that by specifying a new class .WebViewer based on the class name we used earlier, and saying the height is 100% of the viewport height. If we save this and reload the page, then now Spreadsheet Viewer has got the grid exactly as we would expect. Great. So let's open a file, and we'll use one that we've downloaded from the WebViewer showcase. This is currently in viewing mode, but already we can move around the cells and see what's in them, including formulas. Now let's go into editing mode, and suddenly we've got a lot more functionality. Not only can we edit the contents of cells, we can also change the styling, whether that's making the cells larger, or changing the font, or changing the background color, and so on. And as before, we can see the contents of the cells, including functions, and we're able to interact with this programmatically, but we'll look at that in a different video. For now though, check out the spreadsheet editor on the Apryse showcase, or try this code yourself. Or look at one of the other blogs and videos that are coming, and the documentation that's associated with this fully featured spreadsheet editor. That's just one part of the Apryse Web SDK. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Catch you next time.